So, as a result of rightly practicing virtue and also restraint, a sense of peace and relaxation can start to arise. But how does one distinguish that kind of peace from the peace that is the result of gaining the right view?
So, well, the peace of the right view, it's not just the peace that you have on account of virtuous behavior and wholesome lifestyle. It's also the peace on account of not being moved by the possibilities of things not going your way. So, of losing things, of experiencing impermanence and so on. Those possibilities do not disturb the mind. In other words, mind has been trained in regard to them, and that's the level of the right view. When the suffering cannot arise, not just because everything is fine now, but because even if things were not fine, you would be unable to crave to the degree the kind of that putujanas dukkha would have arisen. So in other words, like Putujana craves against his feelings because he hasn't understood the nature of feelings. So it's not just about like diminishing and reducing the outputs of your craving. It's about understanding the nature of where that craving is. So the more you understand the nature of feelings, the more you understand the impermanence, which can only be done on the basis of not running away from them, not covering up, not managing, but being able to like withstand them to the full extent. That's how you get to see the craving that kind of resides there, so to speak. There was always in regard to what's being felt.
And when someone has been practicing that virtue and that restraint, but they still have doubt about...
Well, exactly. So you have to practice virtue and sense restraint, but in and of itself, that will not guarantee you the right view. So on top of your virtue and sense restraint, you have to be frequently recollecting the impermanence, loss of dear things, and not running away from it, and not just trying to psychologize it and sort of create an emotional buffer to prepare yourself when it comes so that I can bear it. And it's like, no, you want to be bringing it up so that your mind gets used to it, so that it stops gratuitously by default, that stops resisting it. All those perceptions of change, perceptions of losing, perceptions of health, losing the health and life and so on. Like those are the contemplations that whether a householder or a bhikkhu, you have to do it if you want to get the right view. Because the reason people don't have the right view is because they don't allow these perceptions to land. Like everybody's experiencing them, but the point is they're experiencing them with the attitude of, I must get rid of this as soon as it's felt. I must manage this as soon as it arises. I must cover this up by any means necessary, any practice, any technique, anything I can do to keep the lid on this. It's like, no, it's the opposite. You should be able to take it on in a fullest extent, the perception of impermanence, and not be moved by it. Because the suffering does not come from things changing. It doesn't come from perceiving impermanence. It comes from craving against what's felt when you perceive impermanence. So you're resisting the discomfort of it, and therefore you're avoiding those perceptions. So that's the fundamental difference between somebody who's like perfectly virtuous and sense restrained, but without the right view, and the one with the right view. And that would also be the difference even between somebody who is perfectly virtuous and restrained without the right view and somebody with the right view who is sort of lapsing in their virtue and so on. Like externally, they might not be maintaining the standard as wholesomely as the former person, the Putujana, but internally, they have dug deeper. So they're not just keeping it at the arm's length and then hoping that the virtue and sense restraint will just magically make the mind sort of not be affected by these perceptions. It will help, sure. All of that helps to not be affected. But fundamentally, in order to uproot it, in order to understand it, you really need to be taking on those perceptions and, as the sutta says, frequently dwelling on them. Like basically conditioning your mind to stop looking away and twitching when those perceptions come up.
And now, when someone is making effort to practice these contemplations, but the whole thing just begins to feel sort of numb, or it doesn't touch you in the same way as it did before, is that necessarily a sign of progress, or could there be still like somebody just took a wrong turn with all of this somewhere?
Well, it wouldn't. I don't know if I would say it took a wrong turn. If somebody's giving the precepts and practicing these reflections, yeah, things might become dry and they might not feel it and so on. Which means basically it's not like they took the wrong turn, but it's more like they're not making it personal enough. So that's the difference. Because again, as long as you're not Sotapanna or higher, there are going to be things, obvious things, that you're covering up and using as a safety sort of zone and a safety net. And even when you then practice and contemplate, you leave those things out. So if you want to make your practice alive, just re-include those things and start questioning them. Things that you just deem have to be a certain way. And then you just start asking, well, do they? Do they have to be that way? Oh, I can't practice because of such and such. Well, that is what you chose to be the reason, but can you really not practice? Can you really not upgrade the precepts? Can you really not endure those states of mind? You can, but you fail. But there's a difference between trying genuinely and failing, and then trying, failing, and then convincing yourself that it can't be done. That's the difference. So even if you keep failing, but for as long as you're trying to do it, you're kind of aiming in the right direction. But if you say from the start, oh, I can't be done, even if you're not failing, you're not doing it. Because again, you're not allowing it to land deep enough where it should land.
Yeah, so then a person has to be quite honest with themselves and deliberately seek out those areas that you sort of intuitively don't really want to go.
100%. That's like nobody else. I mean, people can point it to you or something, but fundamentally that's the type of work that only a person can do for themselves. Nobody can do it for you. You can learn about it. As I said, others can point what to look for, but unless you are doing it, nobody can kind of uncover all of that for you. Impossible.